My parents bet everything on my sister, ignoring my dreams. Now, after years of proving myself, I'm the one they call to fix the mess she made. I was 15 when I discovered my family had already selected who was important. My name is Ethan, and I am now 29. And if you'd asked me then what type of family I come from, I'd probably have responded typical. However, looking back, the indications were always there. At first my accomplishments were subtle, but my younger sister Chloe had lavish dinner parties for every modest award. Or how my parents were always too eager to abandon everything for her dancing performance, while I sat alone at my soccer games, wondering whether they were stopped in traffic again. They did not. They just did not arrive. Chloe is 3 years younger than me. And, to be fair, she was gifted. The type of child who shone on stage and could stroll into a room and draw every pair of eyes without trying. She had the charm, elegance and amazing ability to weep on cue, which worked shockingly well when she needed to get out of trouble or blame anything on me. My parents, Rachel and John, were completely enamored with her. Not in a proud parent sense, but as if they considered her as a valuable investment. Initially, I didn't mind. I wasn't the sort that competed for attention. I liked dabbling with electronics, making projects in the garage, and understanding how things worked. While Chloe was mastering pirouettes and receiving standing ovations at the school play, I was reviving old laptops and making a little bucks mending phones for neighbors. I was pleased of my small projects. However, my parents never looked up from Chloe long enough to notice. When they did, they typically said something like, "That's nice, Ethan, but don't spend too much time on that stuff. You don't want to burn out before you even get to college." College. That became the line in the sand. Chloe was prepared for it. Elite summer camps, tutoring and college prep courses begin freshman year. I was advised to be practical and explore trade school. There's nothing wrong with trade school, of course. But this wasn't my dream. I intended to study engineering and possibly create a tech firm eventually. But whenever I discussed it, I received the same reaction. A tight-lipped smile and a lecture on how not everyone is cut out to pursue huge dreams. It stung. But I pushed through. I assumed that if I just proved myself, people would come around. So I continued to work, correcting problems, learning to code, and educating myself software design using old manuals and YouTube videos. At the age of 18, I developed my first app. It was clumsy, unattractive, and barely functional. But it was mine. I recall showing it to my parents, anticipating something. Interest, curiosity, and perhaps even pride. Instead, my mother glanced at her phone halfway through and remarked, "You know, Chloe's team might qualify for nationals this year. Isn't that exciting?" That was the first time I didn't respond, simply nodded and left the room. The older we became, the worse things got. My mother nearly micromanaged Chloe's application to Ivy League institutions, which involved a team of private consultants and a vision board. I was attending night studies at a small college while running a thriving repair company from my basement. I was earning more than I expected, enough to buy my own beat-up automobile and begin saving. My parents, however, continued to consider it as a pastime, as if I were simply spinning my wheels until I found something worthwhile to do. The moment that really impacted me, though, was when Chloe was accepted into Columbia. Isn't this a big moment? I congratulated her honestly. I mean it. And the entire family hosted this enormous dinner party. Friends, extended family, catered cuisine, and champagne for the grown-ups. And sometime between the speeches and the toasts, my father stepped up, clinked his glass and said, "We always knew Chloe would do something special. She's the kind of person who can lead a company someday, maybe even take over the family business." I froze. The family business. My father had a modest but profitable logistics firm that he founded in his 20s. He would tell me stories of working nights, pushing for contracts, and sleeping in his van. I always imagined Dad intended to pass it on to me one day. We discussed it when I was younger. I figured I'd earn it. That night I gazed at him, hoping for any evidence that he hadn't just wiped me from our family's future plans. But he didn't even turn in my direction, instead raising his glass to Chloe, who was grinning like a Broadway star. I said nothing that night. I did not create a scene. But something inside me broke. Not in a spectacular sense, but more of a subtle shift. It's like finally acknowledging a fact that you've been avoiding for years. They had already made their decision. I was merely background noise in Chloe's limelight. Over the next few years, the truth gradually emerged. My parents paid for Chloe's tuition, her off-campus housing, and even helped her begin a little fashion firm on the side. I requested for a little loan once to upgrade some servers for a client project, and they replied they were short on funds right now. I did not ask again. I took on additional work instead. started skipping sleep and working harder. I learned more about business, formed ties with developers, and pursued online certifications in design and AI systems. My side hustle grew into something more substantial over time. I continued to attend family meals and play the role, but I no longer expected anything from them. They did not notice the change. Not really. As long as I smiled and said, "Congrats, Chloe," on cue, my mouth remained shut. I remained invisible. But then came the pivot. The twist that launched everything into motion. 3 years ago, my father convened a family meeting. I remember it well because it was the first time he had expressed an interest in discussing the business with me. My heart actually raced a little. I wondered whether he had finally seen me. But no. He stated that he was retiring early and wanted to lead the organization into a new era. That is how he stated it. He stated that he had given careful consideration to who should succeed him. After considerable study, he concluded it was time to appoint Chloe as CEO. She'd learned leadership at school, knew branding, and possessed natural charm, which he believed were more essential than logistics or operations. I inquired calmly what would happen to the management team, the systems, and the employees who had been with the firm for decades. He answered, "They'll adapt. It's time for new blood." "And me?" I asked. He grinned as if he pitied me. "Ethan, you are doing great in your own way. But this isn't your thing." That sentence stayed with me like a thorn under my skin. Chloe took charge, and as expected, everything began to go apart. Initially, it was sluggish. A few customers lost. Some employees departed. She brought in her college buddies to modernize operations, sacked old hands who had created the firm from the bottom up, and relaunched with a sparkling new logo and a strange mission statement that sounded like it was written by an AI attempting to be funny. The numbers began to plummet. Vendors were furious, but my parents continued to defend her. They said she was finding her footing. She only needs time. I remained silent, concentrating on my own work. My company had grown into a full-fledged technology consultancy by then, with 5 staff and clients in 3 countries. But I didn't boast or gloat. Still, I watched. I watched as Chloe ran the firm into the ground while my parents maintained their confidence in her despite obvious flaws. My mother called me a few months ago. She sounded exhausted. Shaky. She remarked to Ethan, "We need to talk. It's about the business." I sat back in my chair and looked at the charts on my second monitor. One of my most recent contracts had just cleared for 7 figures. But I didn't announce it. "Okay," I responded. "What's going on?" There was a long gap. "It's bad. Chloe made some mistakes. Big ones. The company's in trouble. We're trying to figure out how to keep the lights on. We were wondering if you might stop over and have a look." That was the moment. The moment things began to change. I didn't say anything at first. Just let the stillness go since a part of me wanted to assist. Despite everything, they remained my family. But another part, an older, sharper portion, recalled all the times they had chosen her. I was repeatedly warned to stay in my lane. All the evenings I spent smiling while they celebrated her accomplishment as if I didn't exist. And now they were phoning me, pleading. That was when I understood they had not just underestimated me. They had forgotten I existed. And now, they were recalling at the worst possible moment. But I wasn't the Ethan they had put aside. And I didn't intend to save them quietly. I did not go to their residence immediately away. Not because I was attempting to be theatrical, but because I wanted to believe they needed me. After years as an afterthought, a shadow in Chloe's spotlight. It felt unusual that they reached out first. The next day my mother texted me to follow up. "Ethan, I understand you are busy, but this is serious. Dad is worried. We could truly benefit from your insight." I almost chuckled at that realization. As if I hadn't been quietly establishing my own business while they devoted every resource to my sister's vanity projects. Nonetheless, I promised to come by later that week. I didn't wear a suit, only trousers and a sweatshirt. I wanted to remind them that I was still me. The version they agreed on did not appear to be successful. My mother answered the door, appearing 5 years older than I recalled. Her hair was knotted in an untidy bun, and her eyes looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Ethan," she murmured, drawing me into an embrace. "It's really bad." The living room appeared unchanged, but the vibe was wrong. My father sat rigid on the couch, looking at a folder that appeared to be full with death certificates. And Chloe wasn't even present. Apparently, she was meeting with a branding coach that afternoon, which my mother said was critical. "She's still trying to be hopeful," my mother said, wringing her hands. However, we've lost 3 significant clients in the previous 3 months. The payroll bounced last week. And, well, the bank froze our credit lines. I kept my expression neutral. Inside, I felt a combination of emotions, including sympathy, vindication, and a sliver of shame. But overall, I felt disconnected, as if I were watching a documentary about people I once knew. They put everything out for me. Chloe had taken more than 2 years ago. At first she was full of enthusiasm and big ideas, rebranding the firm and switching to fashionable new logistics software that no one in the warehouse understood. She sacked the operations manager, who had been with my dad since year 1, since he didn't fit in with the new culture. She had hired her college roommate to manage vendor contracts, which resulted in a legal disaster. And she was wasting money on ineffective influencers to boost the company's image. I flipped through the reports. Read, and you allowed this to happen? I inquired bluntly, glancing between them. My father did not meet my gaze. We felt she simply needed more time. She is under a lot of strain. You understand how difficult it is for women in business. That almost made me choke. I've worked with some incredible women, driven, talented, and creative powerhouses. Chloe did not lack opportunities. She lacked accountability. They asked if I could check at the back-end systems and maybe recommend someone to help. But I knew what they were actually asking. They simply didn't want to speak the words yet. Not out loud. After 3 hours, I told them I'd think about it and that I'd need access to various files and admin dashboards to do a proper review. They agreed immediately. My father even said something like, "We should have brought you in earlier." That was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever received. When I finally saw Chloe the next week, she hardly recognized me. "Oh, hey Ethan," she said, flipping her sunglasses onto her head. "You're here to do stuff, right?" I asked her, waiting. She grinned. "Don't worry, I won't get in your way. I know it's more your speed, more my speed." She still regarded me as the nerd in the garage, playing with wires while she dominated the world. But the world she made was on fire, and she hadn't detected the smoke. Over the following 2 weeks, I delved in, and what I discovered was worse than I had anticipated. Chloe had misclassified employees as contractors, resulting in a pile of overdue taxes. She failed to fulfill several service contracts. A $55,000 marketing effort resulted in 0 ROI, since the influencer she hired was shadow banned for deceiving followers. The CRM was a disaster. Orders were going through the cracks, yet she was still earning a 6-figure income and expensing costly handbags as client presents. I prepared a 20-page report. I discussed immediate risks, mid-term recovery alternatives, and long-term strategic pivots. I color-coded everything. My team, yes, I had a team, assisted in the development of automation technologies that could simplify their process and save expenses by 40% in 3 months. I texted it to my dad and suggested we meet in person. When I arrived on Saturday, Chloe was already there. She remarked, "I read your little report," before I even sat down. Cute. Very spreadsheety. Why? My mother flinched. "Chloe, please." "No, I mean it," she said, arms folded. "It all seems so rational. So binary. But business is more than simply numbers, Ethan. It is about vision, relationships, and narrative." "Chloe," I replied gently, "your tail cost the organization $350,000 last quarter." She rolled her eyes. "You are simply bitter. You've always been. This is not about salvaging the firm. It is about you attempting to prove something." I glanced at my father and mother, expecting for them to interfere. They did not. So I stood up. "You're right," I responded. "This isn't about proving anything because I already did. I built something on my own. I don't need your validation." I texted my parents. "But if you want this firm to exist, she cannot be in control. Not even on paper. I will help, but only if I have complete control. Operational, financial, and legal." Chloe gasped as if I had smacked her. "You aren't serious. You want them to simply hand it over to you?" "No," I said. "I want them to keep it. You ran it into the ground. I'm offering to fix it for a moment." Nobody said anything. Then my mother stood. "Maybe we should discuss this rationally." "No," I answered. "This is not a conversation. It is a decision." My father looked torn. His pride in Chloe was evident on his face. But so did the tiredness and anxiety. And then Chloe said something that ultimately severed the last thread of kindness I had. "If you do this," she continued, pointing to me like a child, "I will tell everyone that you sabotaged me. That you inserted incorrect data. I will go online, Ethan. I have followers. You do not have the right to eliminate me simply because you are envious. The room fell completely quiet. My mother seemed terrified. That's when I understood they didn't know everything, but they were aware she was unstable. They knew she was reckless, yet they let her do it because they were afraid of ruining her ideal golden girl image, even as the home fell. I'm done, I stated gently. If you want my help, I need it in writing. Full authority. I'll have my lawyer send over a draft. You've got 60 hours. Chloe laughed, but there was no genuine sound in it, only air and despair. You think you're better than me? She whispered. No, I said, stepping toward the door. I know I am. Just as I was about to go out, my mother yelled after me. Ethan, please do not leave us. I hesitated but did not turn back since, despite everything, they had not spoken what needed to be said. I wasn't going to return until they did. I did not cry when I left the residence. I did not yell. I didn't hurl things, call my closest friend, or drown myself in liquor like a dramatic film character. No, I drove home in quiet, with the windows down and the chilly breeze numbing my cheeks. When I returned to my minimalist apartment, which had more servers than furniture, I perched on the edge of my bed and gazed at the wall. It was a strange feeling. Not quite wrath, not quite despair. Simply emptiness. I believe I had always held out hope that everything would eventually balance out. That my parents would notice me, not simply glance at me, or remember to send me a birthday text, but as someone capable and worthwhile. But what Chloe said that day, and how swiftly she was allowed to say it, shattered that illusion. They were not going to pick me. They never had. And it was time for me to quit sitting about like a backup quarterback wanting to get summoned off the bench. I didn't do anything in the first week after the blowout. My consulting staff picked up the slack. I had automated a significant portion of the administrative side, and our customer base was solid. We were okay. I was fine, but inwardly, I felt like I had been shattered. Not destroyed, but definitely stripped down to something raw and vulnerable. On day 8, I took out an old writing journal from high school. The cover was torn and bowed at the edges. Inside were doodles of my original concepts for an app I'd always wanted to make. It was probably simple, just a program to assist small firms monitor their inventories across many platforms. Back then, I lacked the ability to make it a reality. Now I did. That was when things clicked. If I was going to succeed, it had to be on my terms. No more awaiting their permission. No more attempting to prove anything to those who just knew how to ignore me. I was up all night till 4 a.m., laying out version 2.0. There are no distractions, no second guessing, only pure concentrated effort. It felt pleasant and familiar, like going home to a version of myself I hadn't seen in years. That same week I met with a mentor whom I had met through a startup incubator years before. Nina, a former Google employee, is now investing in underrepresented founders. I told her I wanted to pivot and develop something scalable, not simply mend faulty systems for others, but to construct my own. She listened, asked questions, took notes, and then said something that stayed with me. They underestimated you. It's their loss. But don't make it yours either. So I got back to work. My consulting team believed I was crazy at first. Shifting our focus meant losing some stable earnings, but I had enough saved to keep us afloat for at least 8 months, if not longer. And I'd rather risk on myself than keep cleaning up other people's messes indefinitely. We started small, with only me, an engineer named Adam, and a UX designer named Sarah. We met every day at my flat. There are no whiteboards or ping-pong tables, only laptops, coffee, and frenzied brainstorming. The idea was straightforward in concept. An easy AI-powered logistics platform for small to medium-sized organizations. One that could identify trends, provide solutions, and decrease overhead expenses in half without the need for a specialized IT personnel. I named it Glass Line because it was designed to reveal what was previously unseen. Every shipment, every delay, every expenditure, and something about that name seemed personal. The first version was released in 8 months. It was not flawless, but it was clean, speedy, and most importantly, functional. We acquired beta users through LinkedIn contacts, and word of mouth spread quickly. By the end of year 1, we had over 350 firms using it. I didn't collect a paycheck the entire time. I lived modestly. No trips, no shopping sprees, no fancy vehicle. Just me constructing something genuine while everyone else dismissed me as a basement IT guy who didn't see the big picture. I occasionally received updates through the grapevine. My parents never contacted me personally, but I did have relatives that chatted. They said the family firm was losing customers. Chloe appears to have doubled down on an influencer effort that flopped. She had also begun to blame the income reduction on poisonous criticism from former employees. Classic Chloe. I didn't interact or remark. I simply listened, nodded, and returned to my job. But then something interesting occurred. Glassline was named one of 10 companies revolutionizing logistics by a mid-tier business publication 18 months after its establishment. A few weeks later, we received our first purchase offer from a competitor that I had respected for years. I declined, not because I didn't want the money, but because it wasn't time yet. I didn't construct something only to cash out. I wanted it to develop and last, to be what people remembered me for. Not the child patching phones in the garage, not the person who was passed over for a failed CEO, but Ethan Shaw, the inventor of Glassline. A month later, I received a text from my mother. "Ethan, may we please talk?" I looked at it for a long time. The next morning, my father called me. I did not pick up, but suddenly something changed. I received an official email issued from the family company's domain. It was a formal request to consult on a last-ditch restructuring strategy. They were finally saying the word I had been waiting for years. Assistance. Not because they wanted to be nice, or because they spotted me, but because they were drowning. The firm was on the verge of failing. Vendors were walking. A former warehouse manager filed a complaint, claiming unfair termination. Chloe had supposedly left town for a spiritual retreat and was not returning emails. And their accountant, who I faintly recalled as a guy named James who smelled like cough drops, had departed in the middle of the quarter without leaving any notes. They wanted me to save them, not just aid them. And for a brief time, I considered saying yes. They did not earn it. Rather, the firm did. There were still personnel present. People I recalled from vacations and workplace picnics. People who had previously offered me food, rubbed my head and said, "You're going to be just like your dad someday." But then I read the email's final sentence. "We hope you will consider this. Chloe did her best. Please understand. It wasn't her fault." That proved to be the final straw. Even today. Even now they would not confess the reality. I couldn't call it what it was. So, I did not respond. Instead, I forwarded the email to Nina, asking her to schedule a meeting with our legal counsel. If they were serious about the transfer, it would not be a casual favor. I was finished doing things out of guilt or hope. They had never imagined I could build something like this. And now that it was taller than the empire they had given Chloe, they wanted to go back in. But I was no longer the child waiting in the wings. I was the one holding the curtain open. And they were about to discover how dramatically that stage had altered. It was surprising how calm I felt when typing the email. There's no bitterness or adrenaline surge, just peaceful clarity. Nina sat opposite from me in the co-working area we had upgraded to following our first major round of investment. The area was bright and contemporary, with plenty of glass walls and soft lighting. The type of area I used to fantasize about while I was coding from a rickety workstation in my bedroom with takeaway boxes piled beside me. Now it was genuine. Mine. "I'm not doing this out of spite," I informed her as I pressed send. "I understand," she replied. "But you aren't doing it out of guilt. That's vital." She was correct. For the first time I wasn't responding to my family. I responded to reality with accuracy, leverage and power. The letter I submitted was not confrontational. It was professional. I wrote to both of my parents describing Glassline Technologies Incorporated's probable takeover of their firm. It was not a consultation offer. It was not a proposition for collaborative leadership. It was a buyout offer with conditions attached. Complete operational control. Full ownership is transferred within 30 days. All decision-making authority was transferred to me and my executive board. Chloe has been permanently removed from all leadership and stakeholder positions. It was not about punishment. It was about shielding the company from more harm and preventing my own name from being identified with their mess until I had complete control. I emailed it, shut down my laptop and did not think about it again for the rest of the day. I had other meetings and projects. Glassline was in negotiations with a big shipping company that wanted to test our tracking software in their regional hubs. I couldn't afford to become emotionally entangled again. But later that night, the response arrived. Not from my parents, but from Chloe. The subject line reads, "This is war." The email itself is a diatribe, with pages of blaming, denial, and twisted logic. She accused me of manipulating our parents and using a sensitive moment. Said I was attempting to obliterate her legacy and take something that was never mine to begin with. My favorite remark, however, was, "You were never meant to lead, Ethan. You just waited in the shadows long enough for something to fall into your lap." I gazed at that sentence for a long time because for a little minute, I believed it. Not because it was true, but because I'd been fed it for so long. It's the same script over and over. You are not a leader. You are not exceptional. You are not Chloe. But then I recalled how I stayed up late coding while Chloe partied. I spent years establishing something real while she created Instagram posts for bogus businesses. I remembered every invoice I'd chased, every issue I'd corrected, and every investor who had turned me down until ultimately saying yes. Nothing dropped into my lap. I didn't respond to her email since I was building it one block at a time. I submitted it to my lawyer and instructed him to file it under hostile communications. If she desired war, I would respond with quiet and planning. The following several days were a whirl of planning. My legal team set to work on creating a formal letter of intent. Nina and I met with our CFO and financial advisors to calculate the maximum amount for a strategic takeover. I didn't want the company since I missed my family. I wanted it since it was valuable if properly recovered. The logistical infrastructure remained robust. The branding was a disaster. The client relationships had burnt, but the business's bones remained intact. It may be rebuilt with the correct leadership. I began gently reaching out to ex-staff members that Chloe had let go because they did not fit her style. They were first suspicious and unwilling to speak. But as I explained what I was doing, their reactions changed. They offered one by one to return with conditions, but the trust remained. They recalled me not as the youngster who used to hang out at the office on half days, but as the man who never spoke down to them, who asked questions, and who was truly interested in how things worked. I also asked my CTO, Adam, to investigate the family company's failing back-end systems. He put together a demo that demonstrated how our glassline technology could replace old infrastructure and save hundreds of thousands of dollars within a year. It wasn't simply about taking control. It was about evolution. Meanwhile, Nina established contacts with a few anonymous investors who were interested in increasing our reach. They weren't concerned about the family drama. They were interested in return on investment. And if I can complete the transaction, it will allow me to enter a whole other market niche. Everything was falling into place. But then came the curveball. My parents demanded a meeting. Not via email or through attorneys. In person, at the office, not in their collapsing head. At first I hesitated. Every instinct told me it was a trap, an emotional plea, or a guilt trip intended to make me react. But Nina persuaded me to accept it. You don't have to agree to anything, she explained. However, power is much more than just winning. It's about showing up on your own terms. So I answered, yes. They came late. My mother seemed more fatigued than usual. Her blouse was crumpled, and there was a noticeable stain on her sleeve. My father seemed smaller. Not physically, but emotionally, as if the years had finally caught up with him. They sat across from me in the glass conference room with sunlight sending crisp lines across the table. You've come a long way, my father remarked, scanning the area. I have, I replied simply. Why are we here? My mother spoke first. We reviewed the offer and aren't ready to sign everything. I waited and said nothing. But she said, we're happy to give you some control. We believe that an 8-month transition time with shared leadership is reasonable. I nodded slowly and stood up. The meeting is concluded. What? My father asked, surprised. You don't have 8 months, I explained. You only have 6 weeks. Your accounts are redlined, your employees are departing, and Chloe is one influencer away from pulling your business into another PR crisis. And you think this is leverage? My mother's voice trembled. Ethan, please, it is still our firm. No, I said. It was. Now the ship is sinking, and I am offering you a lifeboat. If you don't want it, that's great, just don't pretend you're still in charge. Silence extended. And then my dad said something unexpected. She stated she would sue us. I blinked. What? He murmured. Chloe. Without looking at me. She threatened to sue us for emotional damages if we turned over the firm to you. Claim we cut her out unfairly and ruined her future. I laughed. Actually laughed. I said, that's rich. She wrecked herself. I merely volunteered to clean up. They did not answer. I softened somewhat. I'm not here to hurt her, I explained. I am here to rescue what is left. But I will not do it blindly. I refused to do it with one hand tied behind my back. They glanced at each other. My mother wiped her tears. Then my father added softly, we'll talk to the lawyers. That night, I stayed late in the office. I was not celebrating. Not yet. There was still too much at risk. But something inside of me altered. For the first time in my life, I wasn't simply vying for a place at the table. I was putting together the blasted table, deciding who sat at it, what the food was, and what the rules were. I now had the leverage, and I planned to utilize it to rebuild in my image rather than destroy. My parents signed the paperwork exactly 15 days after the meeting. It happened on a Wednesday morning at a lawyer's office that overlooked the metropolitan skyline. The meeting room was silent except for the shuffling of papers and the odd click of a pen. My mother did not look at me. My father's hand shook slightly when he signed the final page. Chloe wasn't present. She'd declined to attend, writing an angry email the night before that concluded, "You'll regret this. You'll all regret this." But I didn't regret anything. When the sale was completed, Glassline Technologies formally bought the family firm, rebranded it, reorganized it, and began the full-scale change. We dubbed it ShawLink. Not for ego, but for insight. The former corporation was polluted, bloated, and broken. ShawLink was clean, accurate, and expandable, and it was finally mine after 40 years. The first thing I did was wander through the ancient building. It was creepy. Dusty areas, unoccupied workstations, and broken vending machines. Half of the warehouse lights didn't even come on. My father had once told me that this corporation was his finest accomplishment. But under Chloe's guidance, it had turned into a husk. So we gutted it. Not totally, but just enough to bring life back. We brought in my Glassline staff. They upgraded the logistics systems, automating 50% of the manual operations, and introduced real-time shipment tracking with anticipated delays. It took weeks of working late, including weekends, but the energy was electrifying. Everyone felt it. Something major was happening. I personally rehired the 5 persons Chloe had sacked. David, the operations manager, nearly burst into tears when I entered the cafe where he worked and asked if he wanted to return. He didn't even inquire about my pay. He simply shook my hand and stated, "I've been waiting for this day for years." The staff gathering seemed different today. No more jargon or buzzword-heavy presentations. We discussed data, outcomes, and strategy, and people listened not because I demanded it, but because I deserved it. Then came the true payday. 3 months following the purchase, we secured a contract with a national medical supplier. They need efficient, discrete distribution throughout 12 states, with no tolerance for delays. That suggestion would have brought down the previous corporation. ShawLink operated brilliantly, and revenue quickly quadrupled. Meanwhile, Chloe collapsed. Following the sale, she attempted to rally online support by creating a long, overly filtered video titled, "The Truth About My Brother's Takeover," in which she portrayed herself as a visionary who had been brought down by corporate greed and patriarchal control. For about a week, her following, who were largely lifestyle aficionados and aspiring entrepreneurs, sympathized. Then images leaked, including emails, bills, internal memos, and leaks from disgruntled employees. It turns out that pretending to be a CEO while operating a fashion blog does not sit well with real business people. By the end of the month, her credibility had been shattered. She lost sponsorships. Her branding coach dumped her. Even her preferred healing retreat in Sedona canceled her speaking appointment. She gave me a final message. "Congratulations. I hope it was worth wrecking your sister's career for a silly warehouse." I did not respond because it was not about her job. It was about everyone else she had walked on while attempting to construct it. My parents were silent following the transaction. For the most part, I heard from mutuals that my mother was ashamed to attend her reading club and that my father ceased discussing the company at all. They had not only lost the firm, but also the illusion. For years, they believed they were establishing a dynasty via Chloe. But they were actually propping up a house of cards. 6 months after the transaction, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was low and worn out. "Ethan, I just wanted to let you know that I noticed the piece in Forbes. You're doing something fantastic. I'm sorry I did not trust in you sooner. That should have struck me hard. It didn't because I no longer needed it. I had already won. Not only the firm or its performance. I redeemed myself. The version of myself I used to hide for their comfort. The child who repaired ancient phones and made app designs in composition notebooks. The adolescent who swallowed his pride whenever they urged, "Be realistic." They pretended that the man was doing well in his own small way. He wasn't small anymore. He was responsible for hundreds of employment, families' income, and suppliers' timely payment. And they were aware of it. Everybody did. We hosted a relaunch ceremony in our new offices, which is a contemporary structure on the outskirts of city. It was sleek, energy efficient, and outfitted with technology that made our previous warehouse appear antiquated. Customers flew in from all over the country. We introduced new alliances, discussed future development ideas, and celebrated ShawLink's next chapter. I stood on the main stage at the conclusion of the night. No script, no PowerPoint. just a microphone and a crowded room. I want to thank everyone who believed in the work before the rest of the world, I remarked. We did this along with those who remained faithful, got back up after every setback, and created something out of nothing. The applause was tremendous. I hopped off the stage and walked outside into the cold evening air. There were stars overhead, silent and beautiful. For the first time in years I was not carrying anything. There is no hatred, no need for retribution, only tranquility. And there, I believe, was the true victory. Because in the end, they did not just underestimate me. They gave me the keys to prove them incorrect. And I did it quietly, tirelessly, without authorization, but on my own terms. And it was the last time I was nicknamed the Shadow.